Buenas and half a day to our listeners on Guam and in the CNMI. It's now time for Total Health right here on Joy FM Radio, where your questions get answered by health professionals. If you have any health-related questions, we would love to hear from you. Call your questions and comments in at 472-1111 or text or WhatsApp 686-9999. If you're in the CNMI, please call 323-1113. Welcome everybody to Total Health.
Hi, and welcome to Total Health. My name is Rose Trina, and I'm here in the studio today with Dr. Jonathon Thorp and Elena Taneva, and they're both healthcare providers at the Guam SDA Clinic. And today we're talking about processed meats.
Hello, Dr. Thorp.
Hi, Elena. So good to be back with both you and Rose Trina here once again on Total Health.
We're so happy to have you here. You know, it's kind of a luxury to have a specialist that many patients would like to see you because they would like to change their lifestyle. And now we have you all for ourselves, and we can ask you all type of questions.
Oh my, the expectations are very high. My feet are very small in the shoes you just made me wear.
I don't think so, because we're going to talk about a topic that you really like to talk about, and that's about fat or lipids, or which fats are healthy and which are not.
Okay.
So there is kind of a lot of confusion even between ourselves as medical professionals, which fats are good and which are not good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have a long history, and especially in America, people trying different type of oils, and then the moment we think we've become comfortable with them, someone comes with an article and tells us, well, this is actually not as good as we thought. You have to change those fatty acids with trans acids, and then we start cooking with them, and then we get another article telling us, no, this is actually pretty bad, it needs to be banned. And so even if you look at the legislation of the American Heart Association and all the laws that were coming with the years starting from 1961, they constantly change, and they're trying to replace and find healthier and healthier lipids and oils that we can eat. And at some point came the coconut oil, and everybody started cooking with coconut oil. And that was great, but then I didn't think we saw a difference also in the cholesterol and the lipids that we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So we are very confused about what fats are healthy and what are unhealthy.
Mm-hmm. No, good question, because our diet is composed of three major macronutrients. So those macronutrients are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And we need all three of them for health. We can't eliminate one completely because our bodies do depend on it. You know, for example, a marathon runner really depends on the fatty reserves in his or her body to power him or her through the race. I just did the do-a-thon here in Guam this last Sunday. This is the first time I've ever done a do-a-thon. It was actually quite fun, where we swim and then run. And, I didn't eat any food from noon the day before. So all Saturday afternoon, all Saturday night, all Sunday morning, no food whatsoever. And I got up and I had tons of energy, and I raced, and I didn't even feel hungry till about 10 o'clock in the morning.
Now you're raising the very high the level.
Well, but the point I'm bringing here is that our bodies are made in an incredible way, and part of that, the storage of energy is in the form of fat. So fat has and does get a lot of bad press, but we do need some fat in our diet. Some. The key word is some.
Yes.
Not too much. Now, unfortunately, the standard American diet, the SAD, or the SAD diet, has an imbalance of the types of fats and the proportion of fat in general for most individuals. So I want to take a few minutes to review with our listeners the different types of fats, because you brought up the example of coconut oil and coconut. And I'm going to first start by this well-known phrase that originated close to 2,000 years ago. Let food be your
medicine.
Medicine. Do you know who said that?
Of course.
Who?
Hippocrates?
Yes, the kind of the first physician of the that we kind of relate back to, and every physician takes the Hippocratic oath to first do no harm. So he did have this phrase that said, "Let food be thy medicine." And so I think it's important to recognize that food means the whole food, not some individual component of it, because it's amazing. God has created all the food that we need, and we can have the opportunity to eat it either in its full components or in its broken down components. And generally, if we eat in its full components, we don't have problems. It's when we start getting into the different processed components that we start having problems. So if you were to go eat 100 coconuts in a day, you wouldn't feel so good. And I don't actually know how many coconuts it takes to make a tablespoon or a quarter cup or half a cup of oil, but it's a number of them. It's many dozens of coconuts to make that much oil. And if you were to eat the whole coconut, what do you get? Water. You get salts in the coconut water. In fact, it's actually the same concentration as our blood. And in theory, you could use coconut water right directly into the blood because it's a solution of equal concentration. I wouldn't recommend it. It would be challenging and would be dangerous in some regards. But if you had to, I mean, that is an option for it. So my point is that it's a very balanced fluid solution. So if you're sweating and it's really hot outside and you need to have something to drink, coconut water is a good option. The challenge with coconut water is sometimes it comes in a can or a jar and a bunch of sugar has been added to it. But the raw coconut water is good. It's healthy. It's excellent. Especially if you take a machete or a knife and you cut the top of the coconut off and you drink it. That's very, very good. And the coconut meat is a complex carbohydrate with fiber and everything else. And then there's the oil that comes with it. And so, again, I'm bringing that example out that you shared, is that coconut oil is just one component of the coconut. And coconut has all these different macronutrients in it. The carbohydrates, the proteins, and the fat in it. So let's take a minute and look at the types of fat. Would that be okay? And to dive into that a little bit more. So there's 4 broad categories of fat. So I'm going to use some technical terms here. So if you're not following it, I know you're a nurse practitioner, you're working on your doctorate in public health, you're extremely knowledgeable and very, very wise, but I need you to help me be accountable to the average listener that might be listening to Joy FM today. So there's 4 different types of fat. So the first type of fat is called a polyunsaturated fat. The second type is called a monounsaturated fat. Third type is called saturated fat. And the fourth type is called a trans fat. So now you may be thinking, why did they have to name these so difficult? Why is it so complex to have these types of names? Well, from a biochemical standpoint, these fats originate from the shape of the molecule. So fat is made up of carbon and of oxygen and of hydrogen. And so the types of chemical bonds between the carbons result in a different shape. And so that's why we have these different names. And so when you have a saturated fat, it means that all the carbons are saturated, whereas a polyunsaturated fat doesn't have a oxygen hydrogen group off of every one. It's unsaturated, poly meaning many, unsaturated fats. So from the spectrum of really, really healthy to really dangerous, polyunsaturated fat, monounsaturated fat are your healthiest, and then your saturated fats and your trans fat are less healthy, and frankly, trans fat being dangerous to your health completely. I'm going to pause there. How am I doing? Did I break that down great. Good enough?
No, we're starting very good, and we'll continue after the break.
If you're listening on Guam and you have a question about nutrition, go ahead and give us a call. Call us at 472-1111. That's 472-1111 if you're calling from Guam. If you're calling from the CNMI, call us at 670-323-1113. That's 670-323-1113. You can send us a text or WhatsApp us or send us a message on Signal, 671-686-9999. That's 671-686-9999. It's free from the CNMI. And if you're tuned in via Facebook, go ahead and leave your questions in the comment section below or send it to us via Messenger. We'll be right back after this break.
Hey Mom, remember how you were telling us about the new daycare programs to help the people of Guam?
Yes, Kiko. The first childcare programs begin April 5th.
To help many more working families?
Thousands more, which means that more moms and dads can support their families and local businesses.
Like Tata Snack Shop?
That's right, Kiko.
More families working means more money for snacks?
Yes, Kiko. Families can visit guamchildcare.com for information and to apply today.
This ad is paid for with federal funds administered by the Department of Public Health and Social Services.
Stories of evil.
The worst grade school shooting in U.S. history, at least 27 dead.
Stories of pain.
Gunmen stormed the cinema, opening fire.
We need rescue inside the auditorium, multiple victims.
Stories of hope.
We pulled together and found God in the middle of all that. We've been humbled, but God's with the humble. He's with the broken in heart.
Hope. Hebrews calls it the anchor of our soul. When our mind wants to drift to worst case, our soul can refer to the hope we have in God. No matter what the circumstances around us are like, the hope we find in God's Word assures us there are better days ahead.
Oh God, you have come through in the life of Moses. You can come through now. And I refuse to run or panic. I trust you, oh God.
Don't lose hope. Make that your story. Joy FM.
Family-friendly radio. JoyFMRadio.net.
Si Joe Mossy, and thanks for listening to Total Health on Joy FM. We want to hear from you. Call in with your health-related questions at 472-1111. In Guam or in the CNMI, the number to call is 323-1113. Text or WhatsApp us at 686-9999. And now, back to the show.
Hi, and welcome back to Total Health Live. My name is Rose Trina, and I'm here in the studio today with Dr. Jonathon Thorp and Elena Taneva, who are both healthcare providers at the Guam SDA Clinic. Today, before we went to the break, we were actually talking about the different kinds of fats.
Thank you, Rose Trina. Yes, we were just touching on the different types of fats and how the different molecules are shaped, and that's how they get their names. And I don't want to get lost in the woods. We want to look at the forest, not the individual tree, as the saying goes. So let's just finish out the types of fats. So polyunsaturated fat is what we need to be focusing on. And there's two different types of key polyunsaturated fats. Those are omega-3 and the omega-6. And generally the omega-3 fatty acids are considered anti-inflammatory. So, Elena, I'm actually going to throw it back to you, and you can toss it back to me, the question, but what's an example of a polyunsaturated fat in our diet?
So luckily we have many type of oils that we can select from, and I can just give one of them that I grew up with in Bulgaria, sunflower.
Okay.
Is the one that contains those cottonseed oil, sesame oil, safflower oil, soybeans.
Okay.
Corn oil, nuts and seeds.
And what about olive?
Okay, olive is monosaturated.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, monosaturated, absolutely. So, so those types of fats are the healthy one. What about actual not oils, but food products that are high in those types of fats? Any ideas with that?
Like plant-based, you're talking about. I know them, but in my language.
Yeah, so like flaxseed, for example.
Correct.
Flax is incredibly healthy and very high in omega-3 fatty acids. Almonds, walnuts also have very high amounts of that. So we want to be getting most of our fat from that source and not from saturated and definitely not from trans fats. So just as an idea of roughly how much fat we should be aiming for number-wise in our diet. So omega-3 fatty acids, the really very strongly anti-inflammatory fatty acids, about 1.6 grams per day. And these are vitally important for our neurodevelopment. And then the omega-6 fatty acids, about 17 grams per day. And this is essential for the membrane of the cell. So every cell in our body has these fatty acids in it. And so it's involved a signaling process in the cell. and it's also a precursor to many of the hormones in our body too. So I'm going to leave it there with polyunsaturated fats. And so the monounsaturated fats, as you mentioned, and a good way to think of this is that at room temperature, if it's solid or not solid. So if the oil is solid at room temperature,
it's saturated.
It's saturated. If it's solid at let's say you put it in the refrigerator, like we store olive oil, for example, in the refrigerator, it turns almost into a solid, and then you take it out of the refrigerator and it goes back to a liquid. So that's an example of a monounsaturated, whereas polyunsaturated is almost liquid at most room and refrigerator temperatures. So that's kind of a way to estimate of what type of fat it is. And so, the monounsaturated fats are good to be used in place of saturated fats and trans fats, and so they may help lower the LDL cholesterol. We can start talking about cholesterol here, right. Because I know we're going to touch on that also. So there's total cholesterol, and then there's the quotes bad cholesterol and the quotes good cholesterol. So LDL is the bad cholesterol. This is the atherogenic cholesterol. And what that word means is that the cholesterol is layered in and starts to build up in the wall of the blood vessels. So that's manifests in patients with chest pain, in leg pain, in strokes, and those are all examples of how the LDL affects our body. So low density lipoprotein results in the buildup of these plaques in our body whereas the HDL is our quotes good cholesterol, and so that's the one that it comes in it. The monounsaturated fats can help raise that. So like avocado, for example, olives can all raise those.
Yeah, oatmeal as well.
Yeah,
but in some people, they can never raise a very good amount of high intensity HDL because they just don't have any plaques to remove. So when people that are really, really healthy, their HDL might be low and they're still healthy.
Yeah, good point. So let's start talking a little bit more about the saturated fats and the trans fat, because this is where most people that I see on a daily basis are getting most of their fats from. So I'm going to throw it to you as a question. What are some of the different sources of saturated fat in our diets?
So that comes, we can blame the meat for that first, but it comes mainly from animal products. Yes, and it has been really linked with cardiovascular conditions, including some inflammatory conditions like COPD and even cancers.
Absolutely.
Yes, and red meat, even though pork looks white, we still consider it as a red meat, and it has been linked to all those conditions that I just mentioned.
Right, so it's a significant negative impact on people's health are the red meats. And so it's interesting that World Health Organization has actually labeled red meat as a carcinogen, a cancer-causing agent. So that should really give every person pause and think, well, I live in Micronesia. The rate of cancer already is much, much higher for many factors. Unfortunately, with the history of the ionized radiation following the nuclear testing, that's one big factor in it. But then the types of food that people are eating and how it's prepared also is really negatively impacts patients' lives. So yes, the rate of cancer, heart disease is very, very high here in the islands.
Yeah, we know that. And the diet. Many times patients come into my clinic and I see elevated LDL, what we mentioned, cholesterol, and they say, what can I do? That's our tomorrow diet. And I understand, but our health comes first.
Right. So what's a very common example of saturated fats that people are eating that you're seeing?
Oh, right here in coconut oil on the coconut oil is pretty saturated. And
yes.
I mean, there is nothing wrong with the coconut oil per se if you can use it in a small quantity, but when you cook everything over and over and over, it doesn't become one of the healthiest oils.
What about animal products?
Animal products, luncheon meats.
Yeah, luncheon meats. Oh,
Yes.
luncheon meats. I see a lot of luncheon meats being sold in the store. So maybe we won't get into too many specific names, but what's some luncheon products that you're hearing of patients eating frequently?
Sausages, chorizos,
Okay.
the favorite sausages, Spam.
Okay.
Spam is kind of a number one. It comes always first on the list.
Right.
And I didn't know what Spam until I visited Hawaii. I've never heard about
Okay.
that. I come from Europe. But when I came to Guam, I was very surprised. They look with some nice and shiny wrappings. It looks like better than a candy.
Yeah.
And I know that there is a lot of preparation into that to look good and, elegant and delicious.
The marketers, no matter what the food is, the marketing people do a really good job with it. That specific brand is just one example of many processed meats, but what's typically in those types of products? Like what's in the can?
So there are many things in the can, and surprisingly, someone will say, no, Spam is very healthy because you can find vitamin C.
Oh, vitamin C?
There's 7 grams of zinc. Did you know about that?
That's a minuscule amount. How much vitamin C is in
there is only 1%.
1%. Well, I would still focus on eating the oranges and bananas to get your
yes,
vitamin
of course.
C.
And so, of course, we'll say it's very high in protein. There are 13 grams of protein. And we have been taught as we were growing that protein is really good and you have to be eating protein.
You need some, yes.
But then with time we realized that the more protein you eat, you mature faster and then you die younger. And so we started kind of revising how much of this protein we will actually need to be eating. And there's saturated fat 10 grams, which is 49% of what
in
we
one
can eat.
serving.
Yes, in one serving.
Okay.
Carbohydrates a little bit. Maybe that's why many people would prefer it, especially those that are on Atkins diet. But cholesterol is 70 milligrams, which is 23%.
Wow.
So that alone gives you way above what the body needs. But the most shocking thing is the sodium.
Yeah.
And we have been talking about sodium before. We'll talk in the future. It has 1,357 grams of sodium. Yeah, in one serving.
In one serving. And I suspect that regardless of the company that makes the luncheon meat, if it comes in a can, one serving is probably by the manufacturer 1/4 to 1/5, maybe even 1/6 of the can. But I suspect that many times there's more than 1/6 of the can being eaten at a time. Is that correct? From what you're hearing?
Yeah, from what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Even a half a can or even a full can. I'm seeing Rostrina nod her head in affirmation. I mean, so if you ate a full can, so how much is it? 1,000 what?
1,369 milligrams.
1,300. Boy, you're going to make me do some math now. So 7,800 milligrams, 8,000 milligrams of salt. In a can, IEA. So just to put that in reference, we generally recommend less than 2,000 milligrams of salt in a day. So from one food product in one meal, you're getting 4 times the amount of sodium in it. That's an awful lot of salt.
It is.
And now, after the break, we can touch base on and talk a little bit more about the preparation of these foods, and regardless of the brand, because again, how it's prepared really affects long-term disease.
And that's the music, indicating that we're coming up on yet another break. If you have a question and you would like to ask us, go ahead and give us a call. If you're listening on Guam, call us at 671-472-1111. That's 671-472-1111. If you're calling from the CNMI, call us at 670-323-1113. That's 670-323-1113. Send us a message via text, via WhatsApp, or via Signal, 671-686-9999. That's 671-686-9999. And if you're tuned in via Facebook, you can leave your questions or comments in the comment section below, or just send it to us via Messenger. We'll be right back after the break.
I am more than skin, bones, and an odd collection of muscles. I am more than a father, son, or employee. I am less than the best, but more than I've been, and I always had help. Lots of help. The God who made me makes me more. He gives great gifts. He shares more than I can accept, loves more than I deserve, and He's leading me to a perfect future. I am who I am because He is who He is. And we're family. Joy FM.
10 ways to love.
Listen, don't interrupt.
You will never believe what happened today.
Give, don't hold back.
Of course, I'm sure.
Answer, don't accuse.
How can I help?
Enjoy, don't complain.
Daddy, I made you breakfast.
How thoughtful.
Forgive without punishing.
Father, forgive them.
Speak, but don't blame.
How can we move forward?
Pray, don't stop.
Dear God, I hope you don't get tired of me.
Share without acting.
Am I the only one having a bad day?
Trust, completely.
I know you'll take care of that.
Promise, and don't forget.
You ready to go?
Yeah.
Love is a gift to be shared. It doesn't keep notes on who hurt you. Love gives when it would be easier to withhold. It's a personal acquaintance of imperfection. Love comes from God, and He wants us to share it. 10 ways to show love. 10 great opportunities to share Jesus. Joy FM.
Welcome back. You're listening to Total Health on Joy FM. Call in with your health-related questions to 472-1111 in Guam. If you live in the CNMI, we want to hear from you too. Call 323-1113 or text or WhatsApp us at 686-9999. And now, here's more Total Health.
Hi, and welcome back to Total Health. My name is Rose Trina, and today in the studio we're with Dr. Jonathon Thorp and Elena Taneva, who are both healthcare providers at the SDA Clinic. And before we went to break, we were actually talking about the nutrition. I guess we were discussing the ingredients and nutrition facts of certain meats.
Yes. Thank you, Rose Trina. And we were touching base on that. And, I think I want to just continue the discussion on these different types of fats. So the trans fat is the one we haven't talked about so far yet. So trans fat are the one that are really, really dangerous to be eating. This really significantly increases the risk for heart disease and cancer. And in 2018, the Federal Drug Administration actually mandated that the food industry remove trans fat from foods. Now, it's interesting that there's still some trans fats in food. It just is at a low enough level that they don't have to report it. And so one has to be really careful. So I want to just go over a list of types of foods that can contain trans fat. So
it doesn't come from a plant base.
Correct.
It is all man-made.
Correct.
Because it was kind of a way that we can go away from the saturated fat, so we can create something that it will be edible and at the same time palatable.
Right. So the partially hydrogenated oils, so shortenings and margarines are example of that contain trans fats. Fried foods, so donuts and French fries have these dangerous fats in it that cause heart disease and cause cancer. Commercially baked foods like crackers and cookies and microwave popcorn are at risk have them in it. But there is some naturally also found in meat and dairy products. And this is where it comes kind of back to this, the discussion we were having earlier on the prepared luncheon meats, because those types of preparations typically will have oils in it, will typically have some degree of trans fat in it just from the meat itself. And so this is a cancer-causing thing.
Yes, and also the trans fatty acids, they have been really linked directly nowadays with asthma. Yes, asthma directly and atherosclerosis, as we know, eczema. You will not think about that, but we have more and more patients with skin problems, and you wonder where that can come from. Yeah, trans fatty acid is one of the things we can really blame for. Right. And I can really mention, like, even infertility or miscarriages. So the amount of trans fatty acid really influences our health. The liver, the non-alcoholic fatty liver is very prevalent finding here, especially in Guam. And obesity, of course, it is directly linked with the trans fatty acid.
Right.
And we were talking about the preparation and how we prepare those things. Right. And it was very interesting for me to learn that actually spam comes from the shoulders of the pig. Because this is the only cut that it's not really something that a customer will buy. So the shoulders of the pig mixed making a puree in a gelatin with a little bit of manganese and zinc there.
And vitamin C too.
And a vitamin C as well. But so it...
Gotta get the vitamin C in.
And this is one of the delicacies that came in Guam during the Second World War.
Yes.
And it was introduced to Okinawa to the point that at some point they were not calling Uncle Sam America, but they were calling Uncle Spam. Because America really distributed billions, 12 billion, I think they reached in sales for cans of Spam all over the world. And I thought it's just more prevalent here, but apparently it was a delicacy in UK. Margaret Thatcher, she used to call it that this is a wartime specialty. And Nikita Khrushchev, the Russian vice president, he used to say, well, if there was no Spam, we would have not survived. But nowadays, we're not talking about surviving. We're talking about thriving.
Yeah, thriving.
Being healthy. We are not in a wartime zone, not anymore, not at present.
Right.
So we
and
can
hopefully
really...
not anytime soon either.
Exactly. So we can really stay a little bit away from foods that can cause us damage and go for healthier options.
And so let's talk a little bit for a few minutes about preparation of food, because there's something that's called advanced glycation end products, and the easy way to remember this is AGEs, AGE. So AGEs are a bond that occurs between a sugar and a fat, and it's caused because of what we call oxidization, and it really is determined by the types of food, the types of it and how it's prepared. So AGEs, they form in protein-rich foods. They are more likely to form when temperatures are high. They're more likely to form when heat is applied for a longer period of time, and when the food is dry. So dry heat actually increases the formation of these AGEs in the food. Moistened heat, moistened cooking, like steaming, for example, is a much healthier because it doesn't result in the production of these advanced glycation end products. And so, and over time, the food naturally produces this. So, for example, some nuts, like pine nuts, for example, have a certain degree of advanced glycation end products in it. And so the key when you're preparing food is to use moist heat over dry heat, to cook it for the shortest duration as possible. Now, obviously, if you're preparing meats, you need to still cook it within the appropriate food safety duration so that you're not eating undercooked meat, but not prolonged cooking. Barbecues, for example, tend to be very long. They tend to be dry heats, and they tend to form a lot of carbon on the food also, which is carcinogenic too.
Yeah, many toxins, like potentially toxic lipid peroxides, are formed during the type of preparation.
Right. And so the AGEs are associated with onset of diabetes, associated with onset of the buildup of cholesterol called atherosclerosis, or the buildup of the fat inside your blood vessels, leading to heart disease, peripheral vascular disease, strokes, etc. Results in kidney disease, and also results in slower wound healing. And so, and what's fascinating is that these AGEs actually change our DNA. So, many people are very interested in how do we give the best chance for our future generation? How do I help my kids, help my grandkids, have a healthy, happy life? I have 3 kids at home. I love those kids to death. And the decisions I'm making today will affect them, will affect their children, and affect their grandchildren.
Yeah, it says the genetic loads the gun, but the lifestyle
pulls the trigger. That's right. That's a great phrase. The genetics load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. And so there's something that's called these epigenetics, and this is kind of a complex thing. I know we've gotten into a lot of really deep stuff today, but epigenetics are really, really cool because it actually allows for certain parts of the DNA to be turned on and turned off. And so, you can, this is why you have like two twins that are raised in different environments. One is obese, one has cancer, heart disease, other one doesn't. They have the same genetics, but yet they have very different outcomes. And that's largely dependent on the epigenetic expression. And what's so fascinating about this is the types of food that we're eating actually determine the expression of these genes. So you could have a pro-cancerous, meaning a gene that is more likely to cause cancer, can be turned on, or oppositely, you can have them turn off, all by the food that we're eating. And this is kind of where it all ties back together. So advanced glycation end products, which are formed when food is cooked, particularly at hot temperatures, particularly at dry temperatures, particularly with fats in them, and the sugars, because it's the bond between those two, changes the expression of our DNA. And that's how it results in greater risk for cancer. That's how it results in greater risk for diabetes. That's how it results in greater risk for kidney disease. And so the neat thing is that we can actually reverse this process by, again, letting food be our medicine.
Right. And actually it has been linked particularly with brain cancer, the age products with brain cancer, thyroid cancer, stomach cancer, and fibrocystic changes in females' breasts. There is a direct correlation with that.
Right. And it's not only the types of food, it's not only how the food is prepared, but it's also, for mothers, the type of your overall nutrition during pregnancy. Early childhood nutrition has a big effect on the turning off or turning on of these genes. The type of bacteria living in our intestines, in our gut. We hear about the term leaky gut quite often. And so the types of bacteria results either in a high inflammatory state or a low inflammatory state. And a lot of that comes from the food that we're eating.
Yeah.
In fact, the majority of it comes from the food we're eating.
Exactly. We increase the arachidonic acid, and many of us, we don't know. We think that chicken is really our healthiest option, maybe, but it is very rich in arachidonic acid, which stimulates the inflammatory responses in our body.
Yeah, definitely. There's a few other lifestyle things that can cause these genes to turn on and off. Smoking, for example, the lack of physical activity. Did
you know that smoking has less of those potentially toxic lipids than a steak?
Oh, I did not know that.
Yes, yeah. Steak has close to 600 of them.
Wow.
Toxins.
Very
yeah.
High. So, the types of food really, really affect chronic disease. And so we've talked about fats a lot today. We've talked about the different types of fat, the polyunsaturated fats, which come mainly from your nuts and grains. The monounsaturated fats, so from olive oil, for example, coconut. Then we talked about the saturated fats, which again from coconut and palm. And then the animal fats also, and the trans fat, which are human-made fats through different processing changes that occurs.
And I want to become a little bit more practical, because we can ban everything, but then what do we eat?
Right. Do we just breathe air and drink water?
So I can tell you how I cook at home. I cook everything steamed with water. And then at the end, when it finishes, I'm waiting a little bit to cool down, and then I can add a little bit of fat, because we need fat. Our brain is made out of fat. Our myelin is made out of fat. We need that. And we need also cholesterol that can, be the detergent between the water and the fat, so we can, absorb it very well. But when we take too much of the fat, then our cholesterol goes up, and then we have all this cascade of the problems.
So we'll talk after the break a little bit more about food and how we can prevent chronic disease.
If you have a question, go ahead and give us a call. If you're calling from Guam, call us at 671-472-1111. That's 671-472-1111. If you're calling from the CNMI, call us at 670-323-1113. That's 670-323-1113. You can also send us a message via text, WhatsApp, or Signal at 671-686-9999. That's 671-686-9999. And if you're tuned in via Facebook, go ahead and leave a question or comment in the comment section below, or send it to us via Messenger. We'll be right back after the break.
There's a story that will be told one day. It's easy to overlook what might be said because you're living in the moment and struggling to get through things that might make the pages of your story. Every choice that's made can impact someone's story. When you support the mission of what happens here, you're adding to our story and you're adding to the story of anyone who listens. Your gift helps new information to be added to stories. Give for a storied impact. Joy FM, family-friendly radio.
This month, you could celebrate International Peace Day, World Gratitude Day, and Miniature Golf Day. They all fall on the same day. So pursue peace, be grateful, and enjoy golfing on AstroTurf. Sounds like a great day. We can create all the special days we want, but God made this day. He made it for you. You can honor God, which leads to joy, which changes how you view today. And the best news is, you can do this all over again tomorrow. Joy FM. A store is supposed to have what you need when you need it. When they're out of stock, frustration can set up shop. It's tough for every expectation to be met or even exceeded, but it's nice when they are. You could lower your expectations, or you could listen here. We have what you need. No waiting, no long line, no need to shop around. It happens because our message is God, and our support is you. Thanks for keeping us well stocked. Joy FM.
And we're back with more Total Health. Give us a call with your medical questions. Number to call in Guam is 472-1111. If you're in the CNMI, the number to call is 323-1113. Or you can text or WhatsApp us at 686-9999. Now back to the program.
Hi, and welcome back to Total Health Live. My name is Rose Trina, and we're here in the studio today with Dr. Jonathon Thorp and Elena Taneva talking about nutrition. Specifically concerning processed meats, but then we've been talking about fats, trans fats, the different other kinds of fats. And right before we went to the break, I believe we were actually talking about the different ways to cook your foods.
Mm-hmm. Right. You know, Dr. Thorp, we initially started with the SAD diet, the standard American diet.
Are we going to become a happy diet soon?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so.
Good.
We have all the resources to have a happy life and eat a very good food, especially here on the islands. There is such a variety. But I also want to mention, because we're talking about lipids, so every time when we took one ingredient, those micro elements that you mentioned, and we concentrate our diet on that, it just doesn't bring those great like benefits that we're expecting, like the Atkins diet. Just don't eat carbs, eat only proteins and fats, and then we have other problems. Or Atkins, I didn't know that when Atkins died, they did an autopsy and they checked his heart and they said, well, actually his death was caused because of his diet. So it wasn't really the most successful diet. And then we moved into keto diet. Keto diet was kind of the greatest sensation.
And still is a big sensation.
Exactly. Even Harvard now published an article against it because we see there is science for and against it, certainly, and many people lose weight because you get into the ketosis when you burn the fat instead of the carbs. And it does have some support there. However, I don't know about you, but my patients, when they go on keto diet for a whole year, then when they come back, they're not any close to
I had one patient actually went into end-stage renal disease because of the keto diet, because the protein is hard on the kidneys when you're eating that much continuously. And this patient had chronic kidney disease and then actually ended up tipping over and is on dialysis now because of the keto diet. So it's not something to take lightly. And there's a lot of issues with that diet.
And then the fatty liver.
It's still pretty sad.
Right, exactly. And non-alcoholic fatty liver that can turn even into cirrhosis if you keep on going in that direction. So when you take one thing out of the micronutrients, you will never get the benefit that you're expecting. And actually your cholesterol levels, everything will go up, your atherosclerosis, you can end up with a chronic kidney disease and everything that we mentioned just now. So we
truly
can blame
a sad
so
situation.
Many, very, very sad and continues to be sad. But there must be something happy, like there must be a happy diet, something that we can really share with our audience Is there a diet that really God recommends for us?
There's a diet of abundance.
Abundance.
Okay, not having to restrict, but you can eat pretty much as you want to, and you will be healthy. In fact, you'll be healthier. You can reverse chronic disease, you can treat chronic disease, and you can prevent chronic disease from occurring. So I want to start with looking at the book of Leviticus and the chapter 11. So I'm not going to take time to read through this whole chapter because it's got a lot of information, but I want to highlight one particular verse. That's verse 27. So Leviticus chapter 11, verse 27. Every animal that has a split hoof not completely divided or that does not chew its cud is unclean for you. So pork is an example of this. Okay, or sorry, pork.
One of those unclean animals that the Bible kind of warned us against.
Right, from pigs. So that's one of the many examples of types of animals. So we need to be using biblical principles for this. And I think it's important to even back up further in the Bible to look at what the original diet was. So the original diet was given to man before the fall of man. And so in Genesis chapter 1, 2, and 3, as the Bible student will recognize, in the Garden of Eden, God gave every what?
Plant and seed.
Right, plant and seed for us to eat. Not every animal. The consumption of animal products didn't come until after the fall of man. When Adam and Eve made their fateful choices and they were asked to leave the garden, that's when they had to start eating food, or not had to, but they were given the option to eat food from animal sources. It's really, really interesting. Can I go on a tangent for just 1 second?
Of course.
So our DNA has something called telomeres at the end of it. So
I know about that.
Telomeres are the aging marker of our DNA. So when telomeres are really, really long, our DNA is healthy and young. When telomeres get shorter and shorter and shorter, the aging process picks up. And so animal products, what do they do to telomeres?
I know.
What do they do?
They have a destructive power.
They do, just like on any other ways that we've talked about here too. I hope the listener will understand that so many things come back to the fact that what we eat really does influence our health. And so I want to share with you the oldest recorded clinical nutrition study that has been documented in the main medical literature, PubMed, so it's the main database that we use as physicians to look at medical literature. So there was a review looking back at all the scientific studies recorded in mankind. And do you know where the oldest one originates from?
The Bible.
The Bible. Do you know where in the Bible?
Genesis?
Actually not. So Daniel. So Daniel chapter 1. So the narrative of the nutrition intervention there is, in a sense, the oldest recorded nutrition study known to mankind.
Makes sense.
So let's look at Daniel chapter 1 because there's some really key principles here to look at. So Daniel, a young man, probably in his 20s, is taken captive and marched a long ways. I mean, this guy had to walk across the desert with his friends for weeks on end. I mean, you can imagine their feet were sore, they were tired, their backs ached, and they were in a lot of pain. And they were taken because they were educated, they were wise, they were smart, they were full of energy. And they were brought into Babylon, and in Daniel chapter 1 verse 8 it says, "And Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief officials permission not to defile himself in this way." Now, so the key thing is here the royal food and wine. So what would have royal food and wine been?
Like the top.
The top.
The best food.
I mean, here's a wealthy man. I mean, the king of Babylon was a very, very wealthy man. And so, I mean, every delicacy, every fried food, right? Every
foreign
sweet,
food.
Every foreign food, every animal type of food would have been there because these were Hebrews now living in an exile. So as Jews, they probably would have eaten some clean meats like goat, maybe some sheep, maybe a little bit of cow, beef.
Some fish with scales.
Exactly, with fins and scales. But not the other types of meats. And they made a decision they're not going to defile themselves with the royal food and the wine. And so here they boldly approach the officials and said, I'm afraid, or I don't want to eat this food. I'd rather not eat it. And so they made a conscious decision to ask for something alternative. And what was that alternative? Well, in verse 12, we say, please test your servants. Test. So this is where the scientific study comes in. Please test your servants for 10 days. The duration, so we have a subject, we have a duration, and we have an intervention, okay? So we have a scientific study here in our hands. And the diet that they were asking for was vegetables to eat and water to drink. And then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So the royal official agreed in verse 14 to do this. So at the end of 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. Verse 16. Verse 17. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. And then coming down to the end here, in every matter of wisdom and understanding, verse 20, about which the king questioned them, he found that they were 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in the entire kingdom. So what was their diet? Vegetables, water, and grains. Probably a few nuts too. So what is grains? Example, brown rice. Okay. What is vegetables? An example, the bok choy, the cabbage, kangkong, the avocado, mushrooms. I mean, there's many different types of vegetables that are grown here on the islands or readily available. And so, I've come up with a saying to my patients: we need to eat what your great-grandparents would have eaten before the Western influences came to the islands. So what would that diet have been?
Breadfruit, I would guess.
Breadfruit,
mangoes,
avocados, pineapple,
rice,
some fish, right? But then the rice would have been brought in afterwards. If you go back far enough in the past, it would have been sweet potatoes and taro only. I mean, sweet potato, you couldn't ask for a healthier vegetable to eat. I mean, talk about high fiber, talk about a wide variety of micronutrients. I mean, grown in the soil, these micronutrients get sucked in and they are extremely healthy. I mean, we had some grated mashed potato, not mashed potatoes, grated hash browns made of sweet potatoes that I made the other day with a little bit of rosemary and thyme. Oh my, was it ever tasty. Just absolutely delicious. And so there are good choices for food. And I have a question. Is it worth the investment in your health to make some healthy choices today to protect against chronic disease in the future?
I don't think there is anything more important than investing in your health, especially now with the COVID pandemic. We realize that there is nothing more important. Even education will go and, houses and homes. If you have no health, you cannot even survive a very deep.
So let food be our medicine, and let's turn back to the scripture, to the oldest scientific study of mankind, and shift our diet back to the original diet of fruits and vegetables to ensure that we have long, healthy lives.
Thank you for listening to Total Health. We are at the end of our program for today, so thank you for listening to Total Health and for joining us here on this journey. Tune in again next week, Wednesday, from 5 to 6 p.m. for more Total Health Live.
Be sure to check with your doctors before making any sudden life changes discussed today. Total Health is brought to you in partnership with Guam Seventh-day Adventist Clinic, where health is their mission. We look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Thank you and si Juas Masi for listening to Total Health right here on Joy FM.